Kemi's fingers barely grazed his chest. One light touch. That was all it took. Hyun-woo forgot how to breathe properly. His lungs locked. His body went rigid, then betrayed him completely, pulling toward her instead of away. He tried to step back. He tried to speak. But his mouth found no words and his feet found no discipline. Hyun-woo, she whispered. Are you okay? That innocent question nearly finished him. Because no. He was not okay. Something hot and wild was burning in the center of his chest like it had been sleeping for years and just woke up starving. His hand found her waist before he gave it permission, holding her there like releasing her would cost him something he could not name. Don't move, he rasped, voice rough and uneven. The way his eyes locked onto her face made the rest of the room disappear. He leaned in until his breath was warm against her mouth and whispered like a man begging himself to stop. Tell me to stop. But before she could speak, the last wall of his control gave way. His breath broke hard as he kissed her, deep and desperate, like air had become her name and he had been drowning without it for longer than he knew. But wait. Before we go further into how Kemi and Hyun-woo arrived at this moment, welcome to Afro K Storyverse, where African hearts meet Korean worlds and nothing ever goes according to plan. If you love intense romance, real drama, and twists that will have you throwing your phone across the room, please subscribe to support the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who deserves a great story today. And drop a comment, tell me where you are watching from, and do you think Hyun-woo will keep his rules or break every single one for Kemi? Now, let us go back to the beginning. Kwon Hyun-woo was halfway through a quarterly review when the private line rang. Not his office line. Not the number his assistants used. Not the line that directors and partners called when they needed decisions made. The private line. The one that had rung perhaps a dozen times in the last 5 years. The one that only existed for one purpose. He stared at the phone for exactly 3 seconds, waiting for it to stop. It did not stop. He looked at the screen and his jaw tightened the way it always tightened when his body registered something his mind had not yet processed. One name. One word. Grandmother. Hyun-woo inhaled slowly, the way he had trained himself to inhale when something threatened his composure. He answered. Yes, grandmother. Her voice came through clean and sharp, the way it always did, like she had no patience for warmth in a telephone conversation. Come now. That was it. No greeting, no inquiry, no softening around the edge of the command. Just come now, and then the line died. Hyun-woo set the phone down on his desk and looked at it for a moment the way a man looks at something he knows is about to cost him. Then he stood, buttoned his jacket without glancing at a mirror, and walked out of his office. His assistant rose to her feet immediately. Cancel everything, Hyun-woo said without slowing down. Sir, the merger call is in 40 minutes. Everything, he repeated. His voice carried no heat. It did not need to. On his floor, Hyun-woo's voice had never needed heat to carry weight. By the time the elevator doors closed behind him, his assistant was already on her headset and the entire floor had the particular quiet tension of people who knew that when Kwon Hyun-woo's schedule cleared without explanation, something significant was in motion. Nobody asked questions. Nobody ever did. Hyun-woo was powerful. But Han Sook-ja, his grandmother, was something older and less accountable than power. 22 minutes later, he stepped through the doors of her home. He had been there enough times that nothing impressed him about the place. He knew every room. He knew every staff member's face. He knew the particular weight of the air inside those walls, formal, strict, the kind of air that reminded you without saying anything that every action in this house had a consequence. A staff member bowed and guided him forward. When he entered the main sitting room, Han Sook-ja was already seated. Back straight. Hands still. Eyes sharp. She looked exactly as she always looked, like a woman who had decided long ago that aging would not reduce her authority by a single degree, and had enforced that decision through sheer will. Hyun-woo bowed. Grandmother. She did not return his name. She did not gesture for him to sit. She looked at him the way she had always looked at him, measuring, quiet, deciding. Then she spoke. "You will be married in 3 days." The words arrived like a hand pressed flat against the center of his chest. Hyun-woo blinked once. And then he laughed. Not because anything was funny. His mind simply refused to accept the sentence, and the only sound it could produce in response was that, a short, sharp, involuntary sound that escaped before he could trap it. Han Sook-ja did not react. No smile. No annoyance. No sharp reprimand. Just silence. The kind of silence that said, "I am not joking, and I am waiting for you to realize that." The laugh died in his throat. He straightened. "I am not marrying anyone." Her eyes remained calm. The calm was the kind that existed before weather. "You will," she said. Hyun-woo kept his voice level. "I have no reason to. Marriage is not something I have planned." Her lips pressed slightly. "Your plan is not the plan." His jaw flexed. He hated this about her. Other people argued. They gave reasons, counter-reasons, they built cases. Han Sook-ja did not argue. She decided. And the gap between her deciding and the world obeying was usually not very wide. "Grandmother," he said carefully. "I respect you. But you cannot." She lifted one hand. A single gesture. Nothing dramatic. Just her hand, raised slightly. And the sentence died. Because that hand had stopped conversations in boardrooms, in courtrooms, in rooms full of people with far more legal standing than a grandson who had been raised under her roof. "You will be married in 3 days, she repeated. "Because I have said so." Hyun-woo exhaled slowly. No. No heat. No raised voice. Just that one word, standing on its own. Han Sook-ja studied him the way she studied people when she was deciding whether they understood the full dimensions of their situation. Then she spoke. "If you refuse," she said, her voice as steady as a closed fist, "your shares transfer to Dongmin." Hyun-woo did not move. But something inside him did. The way a building goes still just before the structure shifts. "Your position as well," she added. The room felt smaller. Hyun-woo's eyes narrowed. "That is not possible." "It is." His voice went colder. "You cannot have done that already." "I have." He swallowed once. He hated surprises. He hated threats. He hated most of all anything that reached into his carefully ordered life and rearranged it without permission. And Dongmin, Kwon Dongmin, was the exact kind of man that power should never touch. Charming on the surface, hollow underneath. The kind of man who believed competence was the same thing as capability, who smiled in meetings and stabbed in corridors, who would take a company built on 20 years of discipline and run it into the ground within 3 because he had never once been forced to build anything from nothing. Dongmin with Hyun-woo's position was not just an insult. It was a disaster with a timeline. "You cannot do this," Hyun-woo said, voice tight. Han Sook-ja did not blink. "I already have. The papers are conditional. You marry, everything remains yours. You refuse, Dongmin inherits it by the end of the month." Hyun-woo's fingers curled at his sides. For the first time in a very long time, he felt something he despised. Not fear. Not panic. Something worse. Cornered. The specific, suffocating feeling of a man who has built his entire life on control discovering that someone has been quietly building a wall around him. He forced himself to speak slowly. "Why are you doing this?" Her eyes did not soften. "Because it is time," she said. And in those 4 words, he heard everything she was not saying. This was not a request. It had never been a request. It was Han Sook-ja placing her hand on the direction of his life and turning it. Not cruelly. With complete certainty. He stared at her, looking for one crack, one hesitation. There was none. 3 days, she repeated. Prepare yourself. Hyun-woo bowed again, slow, controlled, every inch of it deliberate, and turned toward the door. His face stayed cold. His steps stayed even. But inside, one thought was hammering against everything else. Who is she making me marry? He did not leave immediately. He stood near the entrance for a moment, hand not yet on the door, composure held like armor over something that was no longer quite as steady as it should be. Then he turned back. Grandmother. Han Sook-ja's gaze had not moved. She reached beside her cushion and produced a thin envelope as if she had been waiting for him to ask the right question. Sit down, she said. He sat. His knee bounced once before he forced it still. She removed a single photograph from the envelope and slid it across the table. Her name is Kemi Adeyemi. Hyun-woo looked down. A young Nigerian woman looked back at him from the photograph. She was not posing. She was not performing for the camera the way people performed when they wanted to be seen. She simply existed in the frame, composed, a little still, her eyes carrying the particular weight of someone who had been carrying something heavy for longer than was fair. Her face was not loud. Her beauty sat quietly and turned heads anyway. Hyun-woo looked at it for longer than he intended. Then he lifted his gaze. Why her? Han Sook-ja's voice shifted slightly. Not into sentiment, she did not do sentiment easily, but into something that held memory. Her father saved my life. Hyun-woo's brow pulled. Saved your life? She nodded once. His name is Emmanuel Adeyemi. She corrected herself. He is gone now. Hyun-woo's chest tightened at the correction. He hated the way life changed tense on people without warning. How? He asked, before he could stop himself. Han Sook-ja's eyes drifted briefly, not away from him, but inward, into something she did not visit often. There was a time, she began, measuring her words carefully. When certain business arrangements went wrong. People I trusted chose differently when their own comfort was at stake. She paused. I was trapped. I would not have survived the night. And he appeared, Hyun-woo said quietly. Han Sook-ja nodded. He had no obligation to involve himself. He knew who I was and what kind of world I operated in. He could have walked past and protected himself. Instead, he stepped in. Hyun-woo was quiet. What did you offer him? Her lips pressed. Money. He refused. Hyun-woo blinked. Refused money. I offered business partnerships. Access to connections most people spend careers trying to reach. She said it with a faint trace of something that might have been old frustration. He refused everything. Now Hyun-woo was genuinely confused. Then what did he ask for? Han Sook-ja's expression tightened in the specific way it tightened when something had cost her pride. One promise, she said. That if he ever needed help, he could call on me. That is all he wanted? That was all he wanted. She said it plainly. He did not want my name. He did not want my world. He wanted a single promise from a woman who still had the capacity to keep it. Hyun-woo looked back at the photograph. Kemi Adeyemi. The quiet sadness in her eyes made more sense now. He pushed the photograph slightly, as if distance would stop him from feeling something about it. You want me to marry his daughter to repay a debt to a dead man? Han Sook-ja's voice sharpened again. Not only to repay. To protect her. His brow rose. Protect her from what? Her father died 4 months ago, Han Sook-ja said. And before his body was even cold, the people around him, partners, advisors, men who ate at his table and used his name to open doors, they began dismantling everything he built. His business. His assets. His legacy. Hyun-woo's jaw tightened. Then protect the business. Send lawyers. Freeze the accounts. Use your connections. Why marriage? Han Sook-ja looked at him steadily, the way she looked at people who were being deliberately slow. Because influence can be argued with, she said. Lawyers can be fought. Frozen accounts can be contested. She leaned forward slightly. But a name like yours, attached publicly to a woman, that tells people to back away. That says she is not alone. That says whoever moves against her moves against you first. Hyun-woo exhaled. So you want to use my name as a wall? She did not deny it. Yes. He laughed, and this time there was nothing in it. And what do I receive in return? A stranger in my home? A life that is no longer mine? Han Sook-ja's eyes narrowed slightly. You keep what you believe you have built. He looked down at the photograph again. Kemi did not look like someone who was calculating. She did not look like trouble or ambition or need dressed up as innocence. She looked like a person who had been standing in grief for too long and had run out of the energy to hide it. But Hyun-woo had met too many people whose faces told one story while their intentions told another. He did not trust appearances. Not even quiet ones. Does she know about this arrangement? He asked. Han Sook-ja did not answer immediately. That pause told him more than any answer could. She knows enough, Han Sook-ja said finally. She wants her father's name protected. She wants to survive. Hyun-woo's chest went tight. He forced his voice flat. This is not fair to either of us. Life is not fair, Han Sook-ja said. I am giving her a way through it. And I am giving you a reason to be something beyond a man who runs an empire and calls it a life. Hyun-woo stared at her, anger and obligation wrestling in his chest the way they had wrestled since he was old enough to understand what it meant to be raised by this woman. Then Han Sook-ja closed the conversation the way she always closed things, like a door that only opened from her side. Her flight arrives tomorrow, she said. The ceremony is in 3 days. Hyun-woo's heart gave a hard single beat. Tomorrow. So this was not a threat designed to move him. It was a timetable already in motion. He stood slowly. 3 days is not enough time. Han Sook-ja's eyes were steady. Then work faster. He took one last look at the photograph before he turned and left. Kemi Adeyemi. A woman he had never met. A woman he was being ordered to marry. He felt trapped and furious, and underneath all of that, something he did not name. Because the worst part, the part he was only beginning to understand as he stepped back into the sharp air outside his grandmother's home, was not the wedding. The worst part was that by the time he met Kemi Adeyemi, he might not be able to walk away from whatever she brought into his life. And he already knew, somewhere below the coldness, that she would bring something. Hyun-woo barely slept that night. Not because he feared marriage the way other men feared it. He feared what it represented. Intrusion. Exposure. Someone inside the walls he had spent years building at exactly the right height for exactly the right reasons. He lay on his back staring at the ceiling and did not reach for his phone. He had nothing to say to anyone and did not want anyone saying anything to him. By morning he had decided one thing. If this was happening, he would approach it the way he approached everything else. Clean. Structured. Contained. A transaction. Nothing more. Around noon his assistant called with the careful voice people used when delivering news to him that they were not sure how he would receive. Sir, Miss Adeyemi has arrived. She is on her way up. Hyun-woo stood by the window for a moment, hands clasped behind his back, composing the face he wore when he needed to be untouchable. Then the door rang. He opened it. She was smaller than the photograph suggested. She stood with a single suitcase and a bag strapped across her body, and no entourage, no dramatic entrance, no performance of confidence designed to fill space she hadn't earned yet. Her eyes were the same in person as they had been in the image, tired in the way that sleep had stopped helping. Not the tiredness of overwork. The tiredness of too many nights spent grieving in the dark and waking up to find the grief still there. And yet she stood with her back straight and her chin level, the way people stand when they are determined not to let anyone see how close they are to falling. Mr. Kwon, she said softly. Thank you for seeing me. Her Korean was careful and decent, shaped by obvious effort, carrying the music of her accent underneath it. Hyun-woo stepped aside. "Come in." She rolled her suitcase in and moved through his entrance without looking around with the wide eyes people usually got when they entered his home. She stepped in carefully, like someone entering a space they knew was not theirs and had decided not to take up more of it than was offered. She stopped in the middle of the living room and waited. Hyun-woo noticed that both hands were wrapped around her bag strap. Not nervously. The way you hold something when it is the only object in the room that belongs entirely to you. He closed the door. "Sit," he said, pointing to the couch. She sat immediately, on the edge, back straight, like she might need to stand again quickly. Hyun-woo remained standing. The elevation gave him the kind of advantage he preferred in new situations. He looked at her for a moment, reading her the way he read a contract before signing anything, and then spoke with no softening around the edges. "Let us be clear about what this is." Kemi's eyes lifted. She nodded once. "I understand." He continued. "You will have financial security." Her hands tightened on the strap but she stayed quiet. "Your safety will be managed." She nodded. "Your father's business interests will be protected." Her fingers pressed harder against the leather but still she said nothing. "In public settings, you will be my wife when the situation requires it." She did not flinch. She simply said, "Okay." That was it. No argument. No tears. No negotiation. No dramatic speech about love or dignity or the unfairness of the arrangement. "Just okay," said quietly, like someone signing a form they had already read. And for some reason that irritated him. He didn't know what he had expected. A fight. A demand for more. A woman who arrived with a list of conditions. Instead she agreed without friction and somehow that made him feel like the villain in a scene he had not chosen to be in, and he despised feeling anything he had not chosen. "We will not live as husband and wife," he added. "Separate rooms. Separate lives. Separate everything." This time she looked up properly. Her eyes held his for a moment before she spoke. Her voice stayed level, but there was something in it, not an accusation, not a performance, just plain, undecorated truth. "I did not come here wanting romance, Mr. Kwon. My father is gone. I am still in the middle of grieving him." She paused, choosing her next words the way you choose them when you have stopped caring about how they land and started caring only about whether they are true. "I did not come here to trap you or to take something that is not mine. I only want what was built with my father's name protected. That is everything I am asking for." Hyun-woo could not speak for a moment. Not because her words were dramatic. Because they were not. They were the words of a woman who had been reduced by grief and circumstance to a single clear priority and had no pride left to waste on performance. He had come into this conversation prepared to deal with someone calculating. Someone who would use the vulnerability of her situation as leverage. Instead he was standing in his own living room feeling something uncomfortably close to shame. He cleared his throat. "Good," he said, returning to coldness the way you return to a tool you trust. "Then we understand each other. Your room is the third door on the right." Kemi stood immediately, picked up her suitcase, and moved toward the hallway. "Thank you," she said again, still measured, still polite, still composed. He watched her go, waiting for her to ask something, anything, a question, a demand, a complication. She asked nothing. Then she paused at the hallway entrance without turning fully around. "Mr. Kwon." He looked at her. She glanced back once, her expression careful and honest in equal measure. "I know you did not choose this. Neither did I. But I want you to know, I am not your enemy." Then she turned and walked down the hallway. Hyun-woo stood in the silence she left behind. He told himself he felt nothing. He told himself this was a business arrangement that happened to require a marriage certificate. He told himself her last sentence was just something a well-mannered person said in an awkward situation. But the words stayed in the air long after she disappeared behind the third door on the right. I am not your enemy. And the most unsettling thing, the thing he spent the next 20 minutes trying to dismiss, was that he believed her. And if she was not his enemy, then what exactly was she? His phone buzzed. His assistant. Madam Han requests confirmation that Miss Adeyemi arrived without difficulty. He typed 3 words. She is here. Then he put the phone down and stood in his living room looking at the closed door at the end of the hall. He had planned to feel nothing about any of this. He was already off plan. The 2 days before the ceremony moved the way forced things always move, mechanically, without ceremony about the ceremony itself. Hyun-woo went to his meetings and his calls and his decisions. He moved through his professional life with the same precision he always moved through it. And yet his apartment no longer felt entirely like his apartment. Because there was a woman in it. A woman who slept behind a closed door and kept to herself so carefully that her presence should have been invisible. It was not invisible. He passed the kitchen late the first night and found her standing there with a cup of tea in both hands, not drinking it, just holding it like warmth was the thing she needed most and the tea was the closest available source. She looked up immediately, startled, then lowered her eyes. Good evening, sir. He looked at her for a second. It is late, he said. She nodded, I staying down. Sleep and I are not getting along at the moment. He said nothing and went back to his office, but the sentence followed him. He did not want sentences from a stranger following him anywhere. On the second day he walked into the living room and noticed a small box of tissues on the side table. He had not put it there. She had placed it without comment, a quiet acknowledgement that she was a human being in a borrowed space, trying not to require too much. He hated that he noticed. He hated even more that noticing made him feel something. The morning of the third day arrived the way unavoidable things arrive, without hesitation, without mercy. The ceremony had been arranged by Han Sook-ja with her customary efficiency. Everything in order, everything contained, nothing left to chance or feeling. Hyun-woo stood in his place dressed correctly, face arranged correctly, nothing on his exterior that could be read as human. Kemi stood a few feet away in a dress that was simple and clean, not designed to announce wealth or claim attention, just a white dress that fit her the way things fit when you have stopped trying to impress anyone. Her hands were clasped in front of her body. Not in anticipation. In the specific way hands clasp when a person is holding themselves together from the inside. He watched her for 1 second longer than he intended to. She did not look like a bride trying to begin something. She looked like a person enduring something with as much dignity as she could carry. When the officiant spoke, Hyun-woo responded on time. Correctly. Without hesitation and without warmth. A transaction. He had told himself this was a transaction and his body was obeying that instruction without difficulty. Kemi responded the same way. Quietly. Steadily. No drama, no tears, just the particular grace of someone who has decided that endurance is its own form of strength. Then the officiant reached the final line. You may now kiss the bride. Hyun-woo's jaw tightened. He turned to her. She lifted her face slowly. Her expression was composed but her eyes were careful, braced, slightly, in the way people brace when they are prepared for something that might feel like humiliation. That particular look bothered him. Not at her. At himself, for being the reason she wore it. He leaned in. He pressed his lips to hers, brief, contained, a stamp more than a kiss, the minimum required by the moment, and stepped back immediately. Kemi did not react. She inhaled once, steadied herself, and stood. Han Sook-ja watched from her seat, unreadable. The officiant offered congratulations. The staff bowed. Everyone present performed the social choreography of a happy occasion. Hyun-woo returned to the penthouse with Kemi and went directly to his office. He sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and forced his attention into work. Work was honest. Work did not require him to feel anything it had not been arranged to produce. Work did not look at him with quiet eyes that had stopped expecting comfort. His phone buzzed 3 times in quick succession. He looked at the screen and his expression did not change, but his jaw tightened. Ji-soo. He opened the messages. You actually went through with it. Then, come find me when you remember what real is. Then, she won't survive your world. You know that. Hyun-woo read each one. His face stayed flat. But somewhere under the flatness, something hardened. Not at Ji-soo's words about him. At her words about Kemi. The casual ease with which she dismissed a woman she had never met, reduced her to a problem, a phase, something temporary that would eventually be replaced by Ji-soo herself. He deleted each message. No reply. No acknowledgement. He deleted them the way you delete things that do not deserve the weight of a response. Then his private line rang. He answered immediately. Yes, grandmother. Han Sook-ja's voice was slightly quieter than usual. Not weaker. Just more careful. Tonight, she said, treat her well. Hyun-woo kept his voice neutral. I have reports that need. She is alone. He stayed quiet. She buried her father 4 months ago, Han Sook-ja continued. She is in a country that is not hers. She has married a man who has looked past her since she arrived. She paused. You accepted this arrangement. I did not, he began. Then behave like a man who understands what that means, she said. Not like a man who agreed and then disappeared into his office. The line ended. Hyun-woo sat in his office for a full minute. Anger and obligation doing what they always did, occupying the same space without resolving into anything comfortable. He wanted to stay at his desk. He wanted the clean, controlled simplicity of numbers and decisions and problems that had correct solutions. Instead he stood. He walked out of his office. The hallway felt longer than it was. He stopped in front of her door. His hands stayed at his sides. He looked at the door for longer than necessary. Then he knocked. Not hard. Not soft. Just enough. A quiet voice from inside. Come in. Hyun-woo opened the door. And the thing that happened next, the thing he was completely unprepared for, was that the sight of her undid the last of his careful composure in a way that no board meeting, no hostile takeover, no professional crisis had ever managed. Because Kemi Adeyemi was sitting on the edge of the bed with her hands in her lap, and she was crying. Not loudly. Not dramatically. The way people cry when they have been crying for months and the tears no longer have the energy to be performances. They just fell. Quietly. Helplessly. Because her body had run out of places to put the grief and it was coming out the only way it knew. She looked up when he entered and tried to smile. The smile broke before it could form. Hyun-woo stood in the doorway and felt, for the first time in a very long time, completely without a plan. He closed the door behind him. Are you all right? He asked. His voice came out softer than he expected. I am fine, she said, and it was the most obvious lie he had heard in years. He took 1 step forward. Then another. Then he sat down beside her on the bed, not close, not far, leaving enough space to show restraint but enough presence to show he had not come to stand there like furniture. He stared at his own hands. He did not know what to say. He had 100 languages for business and exactly none for this. Then something honest came out of him before he could stop it. I do not hate you. Kemi blinked. She looked at him. I do not know you well enough to hate you, he said. She stared at him for a moment. Then she let out a small, broken sound that was almost a laugh. That is somehow worse, she said. He blinked. How is that worse? She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. Because hate at least means you feel something. Not knowing me enough, it means I am a stranger you were forced to tolerate. Hyun-woo did not reply. Not because he had nothing to say. Because she was right. And the accuracy of it sat in him like something lodged where it shouldn't be. Silence settled between them. Then Kemi's voice came quieter. My father used to say that the day I finally married, he would embarrass me completely. She smiled at the floor, and the smile was small and painful and real. He said he would dance until people begged him to sit down. Her voice wavered. He was that kind of man. Loud love. Big laughter. He made everything lighter just by being in the room. Hyun-woo's stomach tightened. And now he is gone, she whispered. And I keep thinking, if I had been there that day. Don't, Hyun-woo said, sharper than he intended. Kemi went still. He caught himself. Forced his voice down. Don't do that to yourself. She blinked slowly. Do what? Carry blame for something you could not have stopped. The words came from somewhere deeper than he had planned to reach into tonight, and he heard it in his own voice, the way they carried weight that had nothing to do with her specifically. Kemi heard it too. She turned to look at him with the quiet attention of someone noticing more than they are saying. Hyun-woo stood. I came because my grandmother asked me to check on you, he said, returning to the distance that felt safe. His voice went flatter. Now I have. He moved toward the door. Mr. Kwon. He stopped. Kemi's voice was soft. Your grandmother called me earlier. She asked if you treated me well. His throat tightened. He turned slowly. What did you tell her? Kemi looked at her hands. I told her yes. His brow pulled. Why? She looked up at him. Because you weren't cruel. She paused. Just cold. He stood there with those words sitting on him and no answer for them. Kemi took a small breath. If we want this marriage to look like something real, she said carefully, like she was building the sentence very slowly, perhaps tonight we could sleep in the same room. Hyun-woo's entire internal architecture said no. Rules. Boundaries. Distance. Control. Everything he had built his life on said no. Kemi raised both hands immediately, palms out, like she was surrendering before the argument started. Just sleep, she said quickly. Only sleep. We can stay far apart. We can even put something between us if you want. Hyun-woo stared at her. And for one single second, something shifted in his face. Not warmth, not yet. Just the edge of something that might eventually become warmth if it was given enough time and enough reasons. He looked away. Fine, he said. His voice was clipped and final. Just sleep. Kemi nodded. Just sleep. He sat down on the far side of the bed. She lay down on hers. There was space between them and the air between them was full, not with romance, not with anything he had names for, but with something real. Two people breathing in the same room. Two people carrying different griefs. Both of them pretending, for entirely different reasons, that they were not affected. Hyun-woo stared at the ceiling. Kemi looked at the wall. Neither of them slept. And later, much later, when the dark and the quiet had worn away enough of the careful distance between them, when Kemi whispered something honest and he whispered something honest back, when their voices became the only sound in the room and the space between them stopped being a boundary and started being a question. He reached out. Not grabbing. Not demanding. Just an open hand. And she met it. And that was the first true thing that happened between them that neither of them had planned. Hyun-woo woke up slowly. For a few seconds he simply lay still, not thinking, not planning, just existing in the quiet of early morning before the mind remembers what it is supposed to be carrying. His body felt different. Not lighter exactly, but less tightly wound. The way a fist feels after it has finally been allowed to open after holding something too long. His hand moved before the rest of him was fully awake. Reaching to the left. To the space beside him. Cold. His eyes opened. The bed was empty on her side. The sheet still held the slight impression of her, the warmth already fading, but she was not there. He sat up faster than he intended, scanning the room with a focus that surprised him. Her bag was still on the chair. Her shoes were still at the door. She had not left the apartment. He exhaled. A long, slow exhale that told him more about what he had been feeling in the 2 seconds between reaching and finding than he wanted to examine. Then he heard it. Something clanging softly from the direction of the kitchen. A muted sound, then a small cough, then the aggressive sizzle of something that was not behaving the way food was supposed to behave. He pulled on trousers and followed the sound the way you follow a sound that has become, unexpectedly, the thing you needed to hear most. He stopped in the kitchen doorway. Kemi was at the stove in his shirt. Not her clothes from the night before. Not the simple dress she had arrived in. His shirt, a white dress shirt, hanging on her like a decision that had seemed practical at 4 in the morning and could not be undone now, the sleeves folded back 3 times and still nearly covering her hands. Her hair was loose and slightly chaotic. She had her back to him and was studying the pan in front of her with the expression of a person who has made a series of choices and has begun to understand that at least one of them was incorrect. The smell reaching him from the stove was concerning. Kemi sensed him a moment later. She turned, and before he could form a single word, she lifted her chin with the particular dignity of someone who has decided to go on offense before the defense can be mounted. "I am not a skilled cook," she announced. "This is your formal warning." Hyun-woo looked at the pan. What had apparently begun as eggs had become something he could not immediately classify. They did not look like they had been cooked. They looked like they had been sentenced. He blinked once. "Is this breakfast?" he said, "or a disciplinary action?" Kemi gasped with genuine outrage. "Do not speak about my effort with disrespect." He stepped forward and turned the heat off before the situation deteriorated further. Then he looked at the toast, which had gone from bread to something resembling charcoal at some point when she was not watching it. "You nearly destroyed my kitchen," he said. Kemi pointed at him with complete seriousness and no apology. "Now you have some understanding of how it feels to be in this marriage." Hyun-woo looked at her. And then he laughed. Not the short controlled sound he sometimes produced at business events when something required a polite reaction. Not the flat social noise he made when someone told a joke in a meeting and it was professionally appropriate to acknowledge it. A real laugh, the kind that moved through his chest and surprised him on its way out, that stopped after a few seconds because he was not used to it and it felt strange on the way back in. Kemi's face changed immediately. She looked exactly like someone who has just won something they have been working toward without admitting it. "Yes," she said, pointing at him. "I knew that was in there." Hyun-woo rubbed his jaw trying to recover himself. "You destroyed the stove," he said. She sniffed. "The stove is resilient. It will recover." He took the pan from her and set it aside on the far counter. Then he turned on the kettle and opened the refrigerator and began to move through the kitchen with the quiet efficiency of someone who has been making his own breakfast for years because it was simpler than asking anyone else to do it. Kemi watched him from where she stood. She did not offer to help and he did not ask her to. They moved around each other in the kitchen with the careful awareness of two people who are still learning the geometry of sharing a space but have stopped being afraid of contact. "Why were you cooking?" he asked. His voice came out softer than he intended. Kemi shrugged as though the answer were obvious. "Because you are my husband," she said, then cleared her throat with the slight embarrassment of someone who has said a word that still feels strange in their own mouth. "And it is morning. In my family you do not wake up and walk past the person in the house without acknowledging them. Even when things are complicated." She straightened slightly. "Especially when they are complicated. So I was acknowledging you. Through breakfast." Hyun-woo was quiet for a moment. He cracked 2 eggs into a pan with the practiced ease of someone doing something automatic and looked at her from the side. "Your acknowledgement nearly caused a fire. Next time I will do better." He almost said something else. He stopped himself. Because what he had almost said was something that sounded like "I would like a next time," and that was the kind of sentence that required more examination than he had time for before his phone rang. He picked it up. His assistant's voice came through controlled in the specific way it got controlled when the news being delivered was not good. Sir. She is downstairs. Hyun-woo's face shifted. The warmth behind his eyes, something he was not yet accustomed to it being there, went flat and still. He did not need to ask who. He already knew. He ended the call and turned. Kemi had already read something in the change of his face. Her hands had found the hem of his shirt and were holding it without her seeming to realize. Her voice was small when she said it. Your ex. He did not like that smallness. He did not like that a name she had not even heard had reduced her volume before a word had been spoken. He stepped closer to her. He took her face in both hands, gently, firmly, making her look at him rather than at the middle distance where she had been looking. I will handle this, he said. When I come back, you will know exactly what happened and what was said. I am not leaving you to wonder. Kemi searched his face with her eyes, looking for the version of this that she should not trust. He waited and let her look. Then he said the thing that came out before he had decided to say it, because it was true and because she deserved to hear it before he walked out. You are my wife. Kemi's lips parted. Something crossed her eyes that was not quite surprise and not quite relief. Something between them. Say it again, she whispered. Hyun-woo exhaled through his nose. He looked at the ceiling for exactly 1 second. He looked back at her. You are my wife. He said it flatly, like a fact that did not require decoration to be true. Now stop. The playfulness that arrived in her face then was unexpected enough that it hit him somewhere behind his ribs. She straightened with mock formality. Mr. Kwon. Say it one more time. He picked up his jacket. He was already moving toward the door. I said what I said. Stay here. He felt her watching him leave. He felt it between his shoulder blades and did not turn around, because if he had turned around he would have seen the expression on her face and he was not ready yet for what that expression would do to him. By the time he arrived at the building the tension was visible in the way tension becomes visible when everyone knows something is wrong but is performing normalcy with great effort. Staff moved past him with the careful haste of people who have been told, at some point that morning, to stay out of the way of whatever was coming. He stepped out of the elevator and saw Ji-soo immediately. She was standing in the center of the lobby in the way she always occupied spaces she had decided belonged to her, dressed precisely, composed in the manner of someone who has spent years being the most visually striking person in most rooms and has learned to use that as a form of authority. Her eyes found him the moment he appeared. She moved toward him. Hyun-woo. He did not slow down. We have nothing to discuss. She matched his pace, falling into step with a familiarity she no longer had any right to. She lowered her voice as though what came next required privacy. So it is true. You actually went through with it. He stopped. Turned. His voice was entirely level. Yes. Ji-soo let out a short, sharp sound that was supposed to be a laugh. Your grandmother forced your hand. Everyone with eyes can see that. It is not real. It is real. She scoffed. That woman does not belong here. She does not fit into your life. You know this. You will tire of novelty and then you will. She is my wife, he said. The words landed in the lobby the way a stone lands in still water, with a sound that moves outward from the point of impact in every direction. The floor went quiet around them. Several people who had been performing their way through the lobby went still. She is not nobody, he said. She is my wife. That is not a negotiation. Ji-soo's composure cracked at the edges. She had expected him to lower his voice. To be embarrassed. To give her the private conversation she had dressed herself up to have. She had not expected him to say it clearly in front of everyone on the ground floor. You are embarrassing yourself, she said, voice dropping to something that wanted to be cutting and landed as desperate instead. You will tire of her. She cannot give you what you actually need. She cannot. Her hand came up. The slap hit him before he had time to register she was going to do it. The sound cracked across the lobby. Nobody moved for a full second. Hyun-woo turned his head back to her slowly. He had not flinched. His expression had not changed. His voice, when it arrived, was so quiet it was almost conversational. "If you say anything disrespectful about my wife again," he said, "you will regret it." That is not a threat. It is a fact. Ji-soo's breathing had gone shallow. Her confidence had become something smaller and less certain in the space of 30 seconds. "You are threatening me," she whispered. He held her gaze without blinking. "Test it." Security stepped in then, professional, firm, their hands guiding her toward the exit with the polite relentlessness of people who have been trained to move problems without creating new ones. Ji-soo went, not gracefully, her voice rising as she was guided out, saying things he did not listen to because they no longer had the power to reach him. The lobby stayed quiet after she was gone. Hyun-woo stood in the center of it. He could feel the awareness of everyone present without looking at any of them. He did not try to manage how this looked. He had stopped caring about that somewhere between saying "she is my wife" the first time and saying it the second time. He had used his power to protect things before. Businesses. Positions. Financial structures. He had protected things because they were his, and the world ran better when people understood the boundaries of what he would and would not tolerate around what was his. Standing here now, having said what he had said in front of this room, he understood that what he was protecting was different this time. Not a position. Not an asset. A person. And the difference between those two kinds of protection was larger than he had realized. He went upstairs to his office and closed the door and stood with his back against it for a moment, breathing slowly, letting the heat of the morning settle. His phone buzzed. He expected Ji-soo, or a board alert, or his assistant checking whether to proceed with the day's schedule. He found instead the private line. He straightened and answered immediately. "Yes, grandmother." Her voice came through quieter than usual. Not weaker in the way she would not allow herself to be weak. But different. Measured in a different way, the way voices sound when they are choosing every word carefully because there are not unlimited words left. "I heard you spoke clearly about your wife this morning," she said. Hyun-woo's jaw tightened. "Who told you?" She ignored the question in the way she always ignored questions she had not decided to answer. "Is it still a transaction?" He looked at the window. He thought about Kemi in his shirt trying to cook eggs because her culture said you acknowledged the person in your house even when things were difficult. He thought about the way she had said "say it again" and then made him say it twice, and the expression on her face the second time. "No," he said. "It is not a transaction anymore." Silence. Then Han Sook-ja made a sound he had almost never heard from her. A small exhale. Not of relief exactly. Of something deeper than relief. The sound of a person who has been waiting a long time for a single specific thing to happen and has lived long enough to hear it. "Good," she said. Hyun-woo blinked. "That is all you have to say? After everything? The papers, the ultimatum, the 3 days, the cousin." "Come now," she said. Her voice dropped another degree. The line ended. He stared at the phone. He should have been frustrated. He should have been demanding more from her than a single satisfied exhale after the most coercive thing she had ever done to him. Instead, what moved through him was something colder than frustration. Her voice had not sounded like victory. It had sounded like time. Running out of it. He left immediately. When he arrived at her home, the staff moved differently. The particular carefulness of people who are trying to make noise seem smaller than it is because something fragile is nearby. He walked through the familiar rooms and found his grandmother in her usual seat. She looked smaller. Not in the way age makes people smaller over years, that was gradual, something you noticed only when looking at old photographs. This was something more immediate. As though the effort of maintaining the volume of herself had become expensive recently and she had begun paying for it with resources she was running low on. Hyun-woo bowed. Grandmother. She looked at him the way she always looked at him. Then she spoke. You think I arranged this only to honor a debt to Mr. Adeyemi? It was not a question. He said nothing. Her voice shifted. Something cracked in it, quietly, the way things crack that have been under sustained pressure for a long time. I did it because I wronged you, she said. He went still. She did not apologize. She had never apologized. The architecture of her authority had been built, in part, on the understanding that she did not owe anyone a revision of her actions. Hearing those words from her now felt like hearing a language he had not known she spoke. His voice came out low. What do you mean? Her eyes moved inward, into memory. When your grandfather died, she said, I blamed you. His throat closed. He remembered that day with the specific, involuntary clarity of events that have been stored in the body rather than the mind. The hospital smell. The weight of the silence in the room after. And then his grandmother's voice, sharpened by grief into something that cut without intending to, turning on him because grief is not rational and he had been standing too close and she had been too broken in that moment to find a better target. I was losing the person who had been beside me for 40 years, she continued, voice rough now. And the loss needed a shape. It needed to be someone's fault because faults can be addressed. Grief that has no fault is just grief, and there is nothing to do with it except carry it. She paused. You were there. You had tried and failed to save him. And I took that and I made it into blame that it was not yours to carry. Hyun-woo's hands had curled at his sides. He made himself open them. I watched you close after that, she said. The coldness that came over you was something I had put there and I knew it and I did not know how to undo it because the only way to undo it would have been to admit what I had done and admission was not something I had ever learned to do without it costing me everything. Her voice dropped. So I watched. And the years passed. And you became excellent at everything that could be measured and empty of everything that could not be. She looked at him directly. So you forced me into a marriage, he said. His voice was flat, not with coldness but with the particular flatness of a person trying to feel only one thing at a time and finding that too many things are arriving at once. Han Sook-ja held his gaze. Yes. He let out a sound that was not a laugh. You corrected one wound by opening another. I created a door, she said. Whether you walk through it was always going to be your choice. He was quiet. Because he could not find a version of that which was wrong enough to argue with. Kemi needed protection, Han Sook-ja said. That part was true. But you needed someone who would stand in your coldness without flinching. Someone who would not need you to be warm before they were warm first. Someone who could reach the parts of you that I had sealed off. Her voice went tired. I chose the most direct path to two things that both needed to happen. That is all I can offer you by way of explanation. Hyun-woo stared at the woman who had been the most powerful force in his life for as long as he could remember and felt, for the first time, that she was also simply a person. Old and tired and trying to fix something before the opportunity closed. He opened his mouth. The door opened. A staff member came in with a face that was too controlled to be delivering ordinary news. Madam, the man began. Han Sook-ja turned sharp eyes toward him. Speak. But before the sentence could arrive, she swayed. A small movement. Subtle enough that if he had not been watching her with the full attention he had been giving her, he might have missed it. He was already moving before she had fully begun to fall. Grandmother. He caught her. And what hit him, as her weight came into his arms, was how light she had become. How much of what he had always understood as her weight had been the weight of her presence, of her authority, of the force of her will, and how little of that was housed in her actual body. He was shouting before he knew he was shouting. Staff were running. His phone was in his hand. He held her and waited for her eyes to open and thought only one thing. Bring Kemi. She had asked for her. He had heard it. He was already calling. Kemi was on her feet the moment Hyun-woo came through the door. She had been on the couch with her laptop open and a half-finished cup of tea going cold beside her, the kind of ordinary afternoon that had no way of knowing it was about to end. She read his face before he said a single word. In the week since she had arrived in his apartment, she had become fluent in the particular language of Kwon Hyun-woo's silences and the things his expression did when something was happening that he could not yet articulate. This was not one of those silences. His face was open in a way it rarely was. Exposed. Not afraid, but close to it. What happened? She asked. His grandmother. She collapsed. We need to go now. Kemi did not ask how or why or whether it was serious. She could see all of those answers in his face. She grabbed her bag in one motion and was already moving toward the door. No questions, no hesitation, no performance of concern. Just presence. Just, I am here, and we are going. In the car, Hyun-woo drove with the particular focus of someone who is using the act of driving to keep the rest of himself from falling apart. His hands were tied on the wheel. His jaw was set. He said nothing. At a traffic stop, Kemi reached over and rested her hand on his forearm. Not squeezing, not dramatic. Just contact. Warm and steady, the way a lamp is steady, not asking anything of the dark, just offering light. She will be okay, Kemi said quietly. He did not respond. But he did not move his arm. At the hospital, they were taken to a private room immediately. Han Sook-ja lay in the bed looking smaller than any room she had ever occupied, the specific smallness of a person separated from the force of their own presence. The monitors beside her made their steady sounds. The nurses moved in and out with professional quiet. But when Han Sook-ja's eyes opened and found the doorway, the fire was still there. Diminished, like a flame that has been sheltered from wind rather than extinguished. She looked at Hyun-woo first. Then, more slowly, her eyes moved to Kemi. They stayed there. Something in the old woman's face shifted. Not relief exactly. Recognition. Come closer, she said. Her voice had lost its command but retained its direction. Hyun-woo stepped forward immediately. Kemi followed, moving to the other side of the bed, and when Han Sook-ja's hand reached toward her, Kemi took it without hesitation. Without the calculation of someone deciding whether the gesture was appropriate. She simply took the hand the way you take the hand of someone who needs to be held. Han Sook-ja looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "There is something about your father that you must know." The air in the room changed. Kemi went still. The quality of her stillness was different from the stillness of someone waiting. It was the stillness of someone bracing, the way you brace when you sense that what is coming is large enough that your ordinary defenses will not be sufficient. My father, Kemi said. Her voice was barely there. Han Sook-ja's eyes, still sharp even now, still present even in that diminished body, held hers. I loved him, she said. The room went silent in a way that had nothing to do with the absence of sound. Kemi's eyes filled. Not slowly. All at once, the way eyes fill when the body receives something too large for the mind to process in sequence. Her hand tightened around Han Sook-ja's. My father, she said again. The words broke in the middle. Han Sook-ja nodded. Her own eyes had gone bright with something old, long contained, finally allowed its space. Long ago, she said. We were young. We came from different worlds and we were afraid of what it would cost to cross the distance between them. So we chose the paths our lives had laid out for us and we told ourselves it was strength. She paused. Her breathing required more effort than it had an hour ago. It was not strength, she continued. It was fear. I have spent many years understanding the difference. Kemi was crying without sound now. The tears fell without her trying to stop them, the way tears fall when a person has stopped having the energy to perform composure. Your father saved me, Han Sook-ja said. Not only in the way I described to Hyun-woo. He saved me later, in a different way. He showed me, simply by being who he was, that a person could move through the world with integrity intact. That goodness was not something you lost in exchange for success. He was proof that both were possible. She looked at Hyun-woo then. He was standing at the edge of the room. His eyes were wet. He was not hiding it. He made me promise, Han Sook-ja said. Before everything changed between us. He said, if you ever have the chance to stop two people from choosing fear instead of love, you must take it. She swallowed. I held that promise for 30 years. I did not know when I would be able to keep it. She looked between them both. This was my chance. This marriage was my promise to him. Kemi's voice broke. So this whole time? Han Sook-ja squeezed her hand once. It was my last attempt to do something right before I run out of time to do it. She looked at Hyun-woo. I wanted to give you what I broke. And I wanted to give her what her father deserved, for his daughter to be safe and loved, and not alone. The room was completely quiet. Hyun-woo's jaw was working. He was doing what he always did when emotion arrived in excess of his capacity to manage it. He was holding very still and breathing carefully and waiting for the wave to pass over rather than through. But it was not passing over. It was moving through him the way things move through when you have stopped being strong enough to redirect them. Han Sook-ja looked at them both. Then she raised two weak fingers. Come close, she whispered. Hyun-woo stepped forward. Kemi leaned in. Han Sook-ja's eyes found Hyun-woo's and held them with the fierce tiredness of someone who has been fighting for a long time and is only now giving themselves permission to stop. Do not waste it, she said. Promise me. His throat had closed entirely. He forced the words through it anyway. I promise. Kemi nodded fast, tears still falling. We promise. We will not waste it. Han Sook-ja's lips moved into something that was not quite a smile but was the shape one would make if the face were too tired for the full version. For a moment she looked less like the person who had arranged and commanded and decided his entire life and more like a woman who had loved something imperfectly for a very long time and was grateful to have had the chance to say so. Good, she whispered. Now I can rest. Her eyes drifted half-closed. Her breathing became the kind that sounds like it is counting down. Hyun-woo stepped forward. Grandmother. Han Sook-ja's fingers squeezed Kemi's hand once. One single small pressure. Then they loosened. The monitor beside her changed its rhythm. Nurses came in fast and professional. People spoke quickly in the clipped language of medical emergency. But Hyun-woo could not move. He stood at the edge of the bed and watched her face and waited. He was waiting for the command. For the sharp breath that preceded a sentence. For the eyes to open with that characteristic sharpness. For the voice that had structured every important moment of his life to arrive and tell him what came next. It did not come. And the space where her voice had always been was suddenly the largest space in the room. Kemi covered her mouth with her free hand. A sound came out of her that she could not fully contain. Hyun-woo stood in the quiet that Han Sook-ja had left behind and understood, for the first time, what it meant to be in a room from which the most significant person in your life had departed. 3 days later, the funeral. Han Sook-ja had arranged many things about her own death with the same precision she had arranged everything else. The ceremony was exactly what she would have chosen. Formal, significant, attended by people who had feared her and respected her and benefited from her in roughly equal measure. Expensive flowers and careful organization and the particular respectful silence of rooms full of people who understood that what they were marking was the end of something significant. Hyun-woo stood at the front through all of it. He received the condolences with the correct words and the correct face. He shook hands. He nodded. He acknowledged each person and each expression of sympathy with the composure of a man who has been trained since childhood to perform normalcy under pressure. Kemi stood beside him. Not behind him, not at the formal distance that the structure of the occasion might have warranted. Beside him. She had dressed simply and precisely and she did not perform grief she had not fully earned. But she was there, and her presence was the specific kind that asks nothing and offers everything, and he was aware of it every moment in the way you are aware of warmth in a cold room. At some point during the service, his hand found hers. He did not decide to reach for it. It simply happened, his hand moving before the rest of him had caught up with the decision. And when her fingers closed around his, warm, steady, entirely without hesitation, something in his chest released a pressure he had not named. After the public ceremony, the private burial. Family only. The small group gathered at the graveside. The prayers were spoken. The last earth fell. And Hyun-woo went to his knees. Not slowly, not with any grace or intention. He went down the way a structure collapses when the load-bearing element is removed, completely, all at once, with no warning and no recovery. He was on the ground beside the grave before his body had told him it was going to happen. The sound that came out of him did not sound like himself. It sounded like 15 years old. It sounded like a hospital corridor and a silence that had been filled with the wrong words. It sounded like every morning he had woken up since and made himself into something cold and correct because cold and correct had been, for a very long time, the only way he knew to survive. The people around him went still. Then Kemi was beside him. She went down on her knees without hesitation and her arms came around him from behind and she pulled him against her and held him with the strength of someone who has decided that whatever this person is carrying, they are not going to carry it alone. "Cry," she said. Her voice was at his ear, quiet and steady. "I am here. I am not going anywhere." He held onto the fabric of her sleeve and he cried. Properly. Without management. Without the internal calculation he usually applied to every expression of feeling that attempted to surface. He cried for the grandmother who had just died and for the grandmother who had blamed a 15-year-old boy for the death of the man she loved and for all the years between those two things. He cried for the version of himself that had never been given permission to cry any of this before. And Kemi held him through all of it. She did not say it will be okay. She did not say she is in a better place. She said nothing after those first words because she understood that some moments do not need language. They need presence. She was present in the most complete way he had ever experienced another person being present, and that was the thing, more than anything else, that reached him. He had thought, when he let her into the room that first night, that kindness was what she was offering. He understood now that it was something larger than kindness. It was the specific offering of a person who has learned, through their own grief, what another person's grief needs. And what it needs, most often, is simply someone who will not leave. She did not leave. When the shaking had slowed and the sound had quieted and he had come back to himself by degrees, he became aware of two things. The cold ground under his knees. And the warmth of her, still there, still holding, waiting for him. He exhaled once. Long and slow. She let go gradually, drawing back to give him room, but staying close. She did not look at him with pity. She did not look at him with the particular careful concern of someone managing a person in distress. She looked at him the way she always looked at him, with the full, direct attention of someone who has decided that this person deserves to be seen exactly as they are. He met her eyes. He did not try to look like anything other than what he was. She gave him a very small nod. That was all. Just the nod, which said, "I see you. That's fine. We are all right." They went home in silence. A different silence from any of the ones that had come before it. The penthouse felt larger that night. Not because anything physical had changed. Because Han Sook-ja's presence, which had reached into every room through the private line and the unexpected calls and the weight of her expectations, was now absent, and the absence was its own kind of presence, the kind that fills rooms with quiet. Hyun-woo sat on the edge of the bed. He did not try to look like himself. He simply sat, his eyes slightly red, his face showing everything it usually kept hidden, and he did not try to close any of it. Kemi sat beside him. Not at a careful distance. Close. The way you sit beside someone when you have stopped calculating the appropriate degree of proximity and have started simply being where they need you to be. Minutes passed. Then Kemi spoke. Softly. Like she was stepping carefully into something delicate. I think I am falling in love with you. He turned his head and looked at her face. He looked carefully, the way he looked at things that mattered, searching for the performance, the strategy, the placement of a sentiment designed to secure something in a vulnerable moment. He found none of those things. What he found was truth and fear in equal measure, offered without armor, without calculation, because she had decided that he deserved the honest version of her even if the timing was imperfect. His throat tightened. He swallowed. Me too, he said. And it frightens me. Kemi's eyes filled. Then a small smile came, uncertain at the edges. Good, she said. He blinked. Good? She nodded. We can be frightened together. That is better than being frightened alone. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he leaned forward and pressed his lips to her forehead, deliberate, gentle, with nothing of the coldness he had put into every previous gesture. A real thing from a real person. That was deeply sentimental, he said. Kemi laughed against his shoulder where she had rested her head. Do you hate it? He was quiet. No, he said. She laughed again, softly. He let the sound sit in the room and did not try to move it. He fell asleep before her. She lay beside him for a while in the dark and listened to his breathing even out and watched the exhaustion leave his face in sleep, making him look like a version of himself that had not yet been taught to be afraid of needing things. She reached over and turned off the lamp. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up, expecting her mother or Priya or some ordinary message from home arriving at the wrong hour. Unknown number. She opened it. The first message, meet me tomorrow. Come alone. If you refuse, I will expose what your husband has been hiding. Her heart went from its normal pace to something faster and less controlled between one breath and the next. The second message, a photograph. She opened it. Hyun-woo in the image was younger, late 20s, the lines of his face softer than she knew them now, the careful management of his expression not yet fully constructed. He was smiling. Not the rare, controlled almost smile she had learned to read over the past weeks. A real one. Genuine and unguarded. His arm was around a woman, beautiful, comfortable with him, familiar in the way that people are familiar only when they have been close for a significant time. Her face was turned toward his with the ease of someone who has never had to manage how they appear around this person. Kemi's throat tightened. The third message arrived like a closed fist. Ask him what he did to her. Ask him why she is gone. Gone. Kemi lowered the phone slowly. She turned her head and looked at Hyun-woo. He was asleep, face relaxed, one hand lying open near her on the sheet, loose, as if even in sleep his body was oriented toward warmth. The man beside her and the man in that photograph and the question now sitting in her chest were connected by something she did not yet have the shape of. She lay in the dark and held the question and did not wake him. Not because she was afraid of his answer but because she wanted to give herself a moment to know what she actually believed before she asked it. Because what she believed, underneath the fear and the racing heart and the cold that had moved through her fingers when she read those words, was this. She believed him. She did not know yet what there was to believe him about. But she believed him. And that told her something about how far she had already come from the woman who had arrived at this apartment with a suitcase and quiet grief and a refusal to ask for more than she had been promised. She stared at the ceiling. The city outside the windows did what cities do in the deepest hours, grew quieter, went lower, reduced itself to a murmur that was almost like breathing. And Kemi Adeyemi, who had come to Seoul to protect her father's name and had found something she had not budgeted for, lay in the dark beside a man who was still learning to stay in rooms where feelings were allowed. And she waited for morning. Kemi did not sleep that night. She lay in the dark beside a man she was falling in love with and stared at the ceiling and turned the photograph over in her mind, looking at it from every angle, trying to find an interpretation that felt manageable. There was none. The message had been precise. Ask him what he did. Ask him why she is gone. Gone. That word sat in the center of everything and would not move. By the time the first light came through the curtains, she had made a decision. She was not going to carry this alone. She was not going to go to the meeting the unknown number had demanded. And she was not going to pretend, for another hour, that everything was ordinary. She would ask him. Hyun-woo woke up slowly beside her, the way he had woken up every morning since she had been there, gradually surfacing from sleep, his face briefly unguarded before the discipline. Returned. He looked at her immediately. Something in her expression reached him before she said anything. "What is it?" he asked. She handed him the phone without preamble. He needed to see the messages himself. He needed to be the one to read the words rather than receiving them filtered through her. He sat up and read. She watched his face. He did not look guilty. He did not look the way a man looks when he has been caught. He looked the way a man looks when a wound he has been carrying quietly for a long time is suddenly pressed on by an outside hand. His jaw tightened. He put the phone down on the sheet between them. He stared at his own hands for a moment. "Tell me," she said. Not as an accusation. As a request. "Whatever it is, tell me." He was quiet long enough that she thought he might not. Then he spoke. Slowly at first, then with more steadiness as the words found their own momentum. "Her name was Cha Soo-yeon," he said. "We were together for 2 years. I was 28. I was different then, not the way I am now, but also not entirely different. She was warm in the way that I was not. She found that funny rather than frustrating. She was the first person who made me feel like the coldness was something temporary rather than permanent." Kemi listened without moving. He continued. "She had a problem that she hid from me. Not a small problem, a significant one. Financial. Her family had debts that had become the kind of debts that certain people in this city collect in ways that are not legal. She didn't tell me because she was proud and because she thought she could manage it and because she did not want me to feel like she was with me for what I could provide." His hands flexed once. "By the time I found out, it had gone further than I knew. I paid what needed to be paid. I made arrangements with the people involved. I believed it was handled." Kemi had not looked away from him. Hyun-woo's voice dropped. 3 weeks later, she collapsed at home. It was not connected to any of the people involved with the debt. It was a medical condition she had not disclosed to anyone. Something she had known about and had been managing alone. She died before the hospital could do what the hospital needed to do. The room was very quiet. He looked at Kemi then. "The person sending you these messages wants you to believe that I did something to cause her death. They want you to believe I had a reason to want her gone." He held her gaze steadily. "I did not. I have spent years asking myself whether there was something I missed. Something I could have done differently. Whether if I had pushed harder to understand what she was hiding, she might have told me about the medical condition too." He paused. "I have no answer. Only the fact that I did not harm her and I have never stopped carrying the weight of not being able to save her." Kemi looked at him for a long time. Then she asked the only question that mattered now. "Who sent the messages?" He exhaled slowly. "I have a suspicion." His voice went colder, not toward her, in the direction of the thought itself. "There is someone in my professional life who has been looking for a way to destabilize what I have built. Someone who has used my personal relationships as pressure points before." "Dongmin?" Kemi asked. Hyun-woo's eyes sharpened. "You remembered." She held his gaze. "I pay attention." He was quiet for a moment. Looking at her with the expression she had learned to recognize, the one that came when she said something that reached somewhere he had not expected to be reached. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was careful. Not claiming, not desperate. Just the specific pressure of a man holding on to something he has decided is real. "I should have told you about her before," he said. "Not because you had the right to know every part of my history before we were strangers forced into a marriage. But because at some point, and I do not know exactly when, you stopped being a stranger. And people who are not strangers deserve to be told the true things. Kemi's throat tightened. She looked down at their joined hands. Then up at him. Thank you for telling me, she said. He shook his head slightly. Thank you for asking instead of leaving. They sat in that for a moment. Then Kemi straightened. She had made her decision about the unknown number's demand before he woke up, and nothing she had heard changed it. We are not going to that meeting, she said. He looked at her. Agreed. But we are going to find out who sent it. She nodded. Good. She paused. And Hyun-woo. He looked at her. She looked back at him with complete steadiness. I believe you. I want you to know that. I believe you. Something moved through his face. Too much at once to name. He brought their joined hands up and pressed them briefly against his mouth, not a kiss exactly, just his lips against her knuckles, quiet and serious. Then he lowered them and held them in his lap. They identified the source within 48 hours. It was not Dong Min, as it turned out. It was someone further back, a former associate of the debt collectors who had been involved with Soo-yeon's family and who had nursed a grievance against Hyun-woo for years, believing incorrectly that Hyun-woo's intervention had cost him a significant sum. He had been waiting for the right moment to cause damage. The marriage, the public nature of it, the photograph he had kept, all of it had given him what he thought was the opening. Hyun-woo dealt with it in the way he dealt with professional problems. Precisely, thoroughly, without leaving room for a second attempt. The morning after it was resolved, he came home early. Kemi was at the table working, her laptop open, papers spread around her, a cup of tea going cold at her elbow the way her tea always went cold because she forgot to drink it when she was focused. She looked up when he came in. He crossed the room and sat down across from her. He did not say anything immediately. She closed her laptop and waited. He said, My grandmother told me, before she died, that I had been living in a room with no windows. That I had arranged it so carefully I had stopped noticing there was no light. Kemi did not speak. He continued. I have been thinking about that for 3 days. He paused. I think she was right. I think I built the room after my grandfather died and I have been inside it ever since, and I have been calling it discipline and calling it control and calling it efficiency. He looked at her. I think it was none of those things. I think it was fear. Kemi's eyes were very still. She was giving him the space to finish. You are not afraid of my coldness, he said. You never have been. You walked into it without armor and you have just been there. Warm. Patient. Real. He exhaled. My grandmother knew something about what I needed that I did not know about myself. And she chose you. And I am grateful, which is a word I do not say often because I have not often meant it. Kemi swallowed hard. She looked at the table for a moment. Then up at him. When she spoke, her voice was steady but her eyes were not. My father used to say that love is not something that happens to you, she said quietly. It is something you choose. Every day. Even when it is difficult. Especially when it is difficult. She paused. He chose it every day. I grew up watching him choose it and I thought I understood what he meant. But I think I understand it better now. Hyun-woo was looking at her with the full, unhurried attention that was, she had come to understand, simply how he looked at things that mattered to him. I choose this, she said. Whatever it is. Whatever it becomes. I choose it. He stood from the chair. He came around the table to where she was sitting. He stood in front of her and she looked up at him and he looked down at her and then he reached for her face with both hands the way he had in the hospital lobby, careful, present, asking without words. She leaned into it. He kissed her. Not the brief, contained kiss of the ceremony. Not the first soft kiss in the dark of her room. This was the kiss of two people who have decided, having seen everything, having shown everything, having been frightened and honest and present through all of it, this is what we are choosing. When they separated, his forehead rested against hers. You are stuck with me now, he said quietly. Kemi made a sound that was almost a laugh. I know, she said. I already calculated the risk. He pulled back slightly to look at her. And? She met his eyes. Worth it. He almost smiled. The almost smile that she had known for weeks was becoming the actual smile by degrees. She had decided privately that each time she saw the full version of it, something in her chest did something complicated and entirely outside her control. She did not complain about this. The weeks that followed were not easy in the way that the beginning of something real is rarely easy. There were mornings when his coldness returned like a reflex he had not fully unlearned, when he retreated into the professional and the efficient and forgot to be human. There were evenings when she was homesick in a way that had no simple cure, when she missed her father with a sharpness that came without warning and laid her low for hours. But she told him when it happened. And he came and sat beside her. He did not always say the right thing. Sometimes he said nothing at all. But he stayed, and staying, she had learned, was the essential thing. And he told her when the coldness returned. He was not always able to name it while it was happening. But afterward, he would find her and say, I went away for a while. I am back now. And she would say, I noticed. Thank you for coming back. They learned each other in the way that people who have decided to try learn each other, imperfectly, with patience, with the understanding that the other person's history is not their enemy even when it is difficult to navigate. One evening Kemi's phone rang and it was her mother's voice, warm and familiar and full of the particular authority that mothers carry. Bring him home, her mother said. I need to see this man who married my daughter in Korea without asking anyone's permission. Kemi laughed. He is standing right here, Mama. Her mother's voice changed to its formal register immediately. Good. Tell him I am watching. Hyun-woo, who had heard, looked at Kemi with an expression that was equal parts wariness and something else. Something that looked, if you were paying attention, like a man who was quietly grateful to be the kind of problem a mother thinks is worth watching. Kemi covered the phone. She likes you, she told him. He looked unconvinced. She has never met me. She is reserving judgment, Kemi said. That is already better than most people get from her. He absorbed this. Then he said, with the careful precision of a man making an actual commitment, we should go to Lagos. Kemi looked at him. You would do that? His jaw shifted slightly. You came to Seoul. The least I can do is go to Lagos. She felt something rise in her chest that she did not try to name or contain. She simply let it be what it was. Large and warm and entirely real. She told her mother they were coming. Her mother said, good. I am making egusi soup. Hyun-woo said, what is egusi? Kemi looked at him with the expression of someone who is about to give a person a gift they do not yet know they need. You are about to find out, she said. That is where this story ends. Not because there is nothing after this. There is always something after this. But because the essential thing has happened. The transaction is finished. What is left is not a deal. What is left is two people who chose each other, not in the easy way, not in the uninterrupted way, but in the true way. In the way Han Sook-ja had hoped for when she made a promise to a man she had never stopped loving. In the way Kemi Adeyemi had raised his daughter to believe love was worth choosing, every day, even when it was difficult. In the way that Kemi and Hyun-woo chose each other, imperfectly, honestly, with their eyes fully open. And that, besties, is everything. Drop a comment and tell me your favorite moment in this entire story. The breakfast scene. The lobby. The graveside. The photograph. The confession. I read every single one and I want to know what stayed with you. If this story moved you, share it. Send it to someone who needed a love story today. Someone who is in the difficult middle of something and needs to see what happens when two people decide that staying is worth more than running. Subscribe to Afro K Storyverse. Hit the bell. New stories every week, stories that are African and proud and going everywhere, stories that trust you to hold complicated things. We are here. We are not going anywhere. We are not slowing down. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Afro K Storyverse.